couple months ago, I was talking to Ross Ward, and he told me that he knew a couple people up in Idaho with whom he really thought I should do an interview. And they were Jeremy Smith and Jeff Fullmer. Jeremy Smith is a longtime coach. He has coached hundreds of youth runners in the Idaho Falls area. And he is also himself a 2014 finisher at Boston Marathon, and he got a sub 30-hour finish at the 2016 Bear 100. And Jeff Fullmer is the founder of the Idaho Falls Trail Runners group, and he loves nothing more than just getting into the trails and running and exploring with the community of people that he has helped build. He's helped establish and host multiple events in the Idaho Falls area. Together, they have helped create the Palisades Ultra Trail Series, or PUTS, a stunningly beautiful and epically difficult bunch of races on the Idaho-Wyoming border up near Idaho Falls. In addition to PUTS, we discussed everything from training, to nutrition, to building a community, to why trail running just seems to bring all of us together. I know you're going to get a lot out of this one, and if you do, I would love it if you left a rating or a review or just subscribe to this thing. I make this so that more people can have more information about trail and ultra running, and I would love it if we spread the word as much as possible. Let's get into the episode with Jeremy and Jeff. Welcome to the Eat Well, Sleep Great, Run Far podcast. My name is Will Frantz, and I'm here to help you go farther, faster, and longer without injuries, gut problems, or giving up your favorite foods. All right, today on the podcast, I have Jeremy Smith and Jeff Fullmer, and they are some runners and race directors and coaches up in Idaho. And I'm just going to have you guys introduce yourselves because it'll be a lot easier than me basically just reading your bio. So if y'all wouldn't mind introduce yourself, and like for those just listening to this, announce your names so we can get used to your voice. That'd be awesome.
We have a bio? Is that a thing?
Where your website has one.
Oh, good. So I'm Jeremy Smith. I am a longtime runner ever since I was young and, ninth grade, and that's a story in and of itself, but turned trail runner in probably 2014 and very quickly took my coaching background and kind of turned it into race directing and did a few free things, and then kind of expanded into bigger trail races like the Palisades Ultra. And that's me in a nutshell. Jeremy Smith, race director, runner, and coach, and just all around weirdo.
Awesome, man. I can definitely relate to the all around weirdo part. So I think we're in good company.
And I'm Jeff Fullmer. I grew up in central Idaho, Idaho's tallest mountain ranges there in Mackey. And I grew up with the background of if you can't get there on a horse or a motorcycle, why go? And so it wasn't until about my senior year I started exploring more in the mountains, and finally living here in the Idaho Falls area. About 2014, 2015, found out that trail running was actually a sport. And I'm like, I've been doing this my whole life. I hike up the uphills and I run down the downhill.
That's awesome.
This is a sport. And so 2015 started the Idaho Falls Trail Runners. Jeremy and a couple others showed up for a cold December run. And then he said, hey, let's go, let's do a fun event up to Lower Palisades Lake on the Idaho-Wyoming border and in February. And let's do a fun group run. And from there, it's taken off. Our Idaho Falls Trail Runners group has about 1,800 members in it now. We do all sorts of stuff all winter long. Dan Beck's a big part of that. He puts on bunch of winter events, just group glorified fun runs. Some of them are fundraisers, and then some summer events. So anyways, that then led to race directing. We do a bunch of free fun stuff. And then 2017 started the plans for the Palisades Ultra Trail Series and getting on the big stage. And
Awesome,
so
man.
hit it hard with 100-miler, 50-miler, 50K, and half marathon. And this will be our fifth year with that. And then I also, with Dan Beck, we started the first Idaho Backyard Ultra back in December. And that was a big success. Had about 50 people start, and people like Jeremy that came out expecting to do about 20 miles and 25 miles, and he's like, oh, I'm feeling good, so he doubled it. It was like 55 miles. So
Yeah,
but
right.
so yeah, just race director. I'm in software and work in the software industry, and so I'm at a desk all day. So trail running and being a part of trail community is a great outlet.
Awesome.
And I've done running myself. I'm only half as awesome as Jeremy. I've done up to Tyler, but haven't ventured much beyond 50 milers, but
half as awesome, twice as smart, I think.
Yeah. Oh man, I was just gonna say a very similar thing. Yeah. All right. So I usually start with like background in running, but I'd like to actually start with how did y'all meet? You mentioned it was kind of a like group that you've gotten together and everything up there. I can tell the community is really important to you guys. And I'd just love to hear how y'all met. And then we'll move into some winter running stuff here since it's pretty relevant for, I'm assuming, both of us. If you're getting the snowfall we are this year, but
yeah, it was. So I'd started the Facebook group in like October-ish, and then finally it was like, we only had a couple dozen people in there, and so I was like, we should do a group run. And so the unique thing with Idaho Falls is, we're kind of this hub for all things outdoors, but we don't have anything here in Idaho Falls. And so that community kind of developed as a need that, hey, we need a carpool together. We're traveling half an hour to an hour to trailheads. And so now all of a sudden everyone's wanting to group up and not go alone. And it just blossomed into this community. But we did do a run in our foothills. We do have some places where we run up there. And yeah, it was in December, and we had Jeremy and me and John Hart, and then we had two ladies that showed up as well, and then that was kind of the start of that friendship. He was training, doing some crazy stuff, and he's like, "Hey, want to come join me at like 2 a.m. to go run 20 miles?" And I'm like, "What are you? This guy's nuts."
I have to ask, what were you training for that got you up at 2 a.m. to run 20 miles?
What was I training
for? Well,
was I training for the Bear 100 that year? Or no?
And maybe that was the next winter, but
yeah, I mean, that would do it, man, for sure.
Well, I'll tell you. So I was a road runner for a lot of years and did decently. I mean, I ran Boston under 3 hours, and like I was decent. But then at a local running store, a friend of mine named Marlon, he said, "You know what? You're a good marathoner." And I was looking for the next thing. I said, "Well, I've knocked off my bucket list of the Boston Marathon. What do I do next?" And I was thinking of doing a full length Ironman, because that's epic. Yep. And you feel like a bad A, and yet I hate swimming, and I even more hate road biking. And so I thought, I do it, but I wouldn't like it. And would I really want to train that much for a 12-hour event or more? But that would kind of be my goal. But anyway, he said, you're backpacking, you're hiking all the time, and you're a good runner. Why aren't you trail running? And I was like, is that really a thing? Because like Jeff, I would, backpack up a mountain, hike up a mountain, and then run down. But is that really a thing? And I looked into it. And so when I think about those crazy things, that is what appealed to me about trail running. So I think that's what I was training for, to answer that question. I
love that.
Probably some of my first ultras in the wintertime was a good time to train, is if you did it in the dark. And that's when it happened.
Completely understand that. So training at 2 a.m., were you just trying to fit it into a schedule, or is that out of need, or why?
At the time, I was going to say at the time I was married. I mean, I've been married for 10 years this summer, so I would have been married then. Sometimes fitting it in. I mean, we adopted our first child actually a year ago, so we didn't have a kid in the mix, but yeah, just fitting it in with full-time jobs. Now I'm a stay-at-home dad, which I've pushed a lot of stroller and pulled a lot of I snowshoe train now and pull my kid on a ski trailer behind me when awesome. It's not too cold. But yeah, I mean, and I've noticed it's making me a lot stronger of a runner. But I think fitting it in, I think that's a big part of it. And I do like the epic side of it. at 2 a.m., like
Yeah.
a chance of seeing animals you might not have seen, and
Sure.
a chance skipping out the people that you didn't want to see during the day. All the crowds, telling people at work the next morning, maybe, or at church or whatever, like,
Sure.
what were you doing yesterday? Oh, I was running till 3 a.m. Okay, you're weird.
I get that. I used to drive snowcats in the middle of the night for Park City, and like there's something about being out in the middle of the night with nothing around. Like the amount I've seen bobcats, seen whatever, like it's cool, man. It's a cool thing.
Yeah, it's rad.
So like I guess back to it. So you got into this winter running. What tips might you have for anybody who doesn't tend to run in a bunch of snow or ice, or like can kind of wants to bring their running a little more year round?
That's a great question. I think I did a clinic at the trail running store on winter running, didn't we?
Yeah.
So we talked a lot about safety, first of all.
Cotton kills.
Yeah, don't wear cotton. I've almost got hypothermia my first time on snowshoes because I wore jeans and a cotton college hoodie that I had, and wasn't expecting for how hard it actually was going to be. And it was at night, actually. Yeah, and I almost got hypothermia. So yeah, cotton's not good. But having the right clothes, letting people know, your plan, and obviously if you're on roads is a little different, but we try to get off the roads. That hence meeting up on the trails, because I'd be more concerned about cars than I would the cold typically, just because sliding around and these drivers on their phones and youth drivers and people that don't understand how this friction works with the snow and ice. And then good trail shoes. I mean, that's a huge part of it. I've experimented a lot. In fact, Jeff laughed at me at the Dizzy Horse Backyard Ultra, or at least some people that don't know if Jeff actually knew, because he was timing runners coming in. I changed my shoes every hour for several of the hours to see which one would have the best traction on that very unique course. And I've found some decent shoes outside of the normal. I mean, I'm a Hoka guy. Typically, I like the Hokas, but I've found a Solomon that I really liked, and I have a Brooks that I really like to wear in the winter. But whatever bites into that snow, I think the footwear is really important personally. And obviously for those that can grow a beard, I'll tell you what, running in the wintertime with icicles on your face, that's another kind of epic, I don't know, points in the epic book, I guess.
Oh, indeed. I mean, I see these people from the Midwest with the like hoarfrost eyelashes. And it's crazy to me. Yeah, exactly. Well, cool, man. I appreciate that. Do y'all ever use anything like those Catula microspikes or anything like that?
So we have a lot in this area that do, for sure, that are training for events. Last winter I trained all through the winter for Antelope Island for the 50 miler on there in March.
Oh, nice.
And so our longest long run was in February, which is typically one of the coldest months in Idaho. And so if not the coldest, then the iciest. And I didn't have any traction, and we got onto some roads, some hard packed roads that were just a nightmare. But yeah, there's that 3-pack. I think they can sell it in a 3-pack of the nano spikes, the exo spikes, and the micro spikes. And so there's going to be an ad for Catula. You should be charging them. But
I know. I bought my own pair, and I seriously feel like they were worth the money for sure.
Oh, and the beauty of it is you can throw them on any shoe.
Mm-hmm.
So you can take an old pair, worn out pair, and then you can take them off. We have people here that'll screw their shoes. They'll put the hex sheet metal screw into their shoe.
That's what I've done, and I really like that. But it is that shoe is gone, and you can only use it not on bare road because that's miserable. So
yeah, I did that to an old pair, and it was very cost effective. But that is now my winter running pair. That's it.
Yep.
No, those have been the most popular around here, because we have a lot of if you're trying to run close to town, a lot of snow covered roads that aren't being used, that aren't plowed, or just wind swept, and so having something that's with that chunky bite works well. But I know we always get that question in our running group. Winter's coming, it gets colder. What do you do in the winter in the snow? I think the best thing I tell people is start early mornings when it starts getting cold, and just run out your front door. take a running pack with you, have extra clothes. So go lighter than you think you'll need. And so you want to start out cold. If you're not warm within the first mile, then you probably need more gear on. But
That's really good advice.
But start in the fall, start layering, start working with that, breathable materials, and knowing what parts of your body will freeze and hurt more than others. So my knees and my shins, I can get away with one layer and it's okay.
Yeah. I was going to say windproof panels on your tidy whities is nice. Yep. And that is a thing that build us.
Yeah. Saucony,
that's actually awesome.
That was one of the best. They've got some windproof pleated fronts that are for running. That's a boxer brief for men. And that whole front panel is windproof. And so, stuff like that, but it's just, and not expecting to buy everything all in one winter. When you're starting out, you can start buying different layers and start adding to your kit. And, it may take a few winters, but you can get there, or just buy everything because you want to. Just get going. But the biggest thing is, people that haven't been running all fall outside and then all of a sudden jump into it in December in Idaho. Even November this year, we were sub 15 in November. Our November was like a January. We had the coldest November, I think, on record here in Idaho.
And we have just had the coldest end of January on record as well.
Yeah. So, air temperature with a negative 25 was the air temperature. And then we had, then you throw the wind chill on top of that, which I haven't seen in my lifetime here. And so anyways, but it's
so cold.
Definitely live by the mantra. There's no such thing as bad weather, just bad gear.
So I appreciate that. I like that a lot. So if you're, I guess, like, all that was really helpful. Now I'd really love to know how y'all got into running to the degree that we're running in negative 25 degree temperatures. Like, how did you fall in love with this crazy sport?
That's funny. I was a soccer player through 8th grade, kind of did all the sports, the basketball, thought I was going to be in the NBA, played soccer and baseball. I was horrible at baseball, but soccer was a big sport of mine. And I missed soccer tryouts my freshman year of high school on accident because they happened before school started. And I had no idea. There was no social media back in the 90s.
Sure.
To let people know, don't miss soccer tryouts. And so I showed up the first day.
Have cell phones to do a group text.
Yeah. First day of high school, I show up with my little duffel bag and soccer cleats, and saw all my buddies I hadn't seen for 2 or 3 months. Hey, you guys excited for soccer? When's tryouts? And they said, we've had 2 games, man. And I just about dropped to the floor, and I went to the coach and just tears in my eyes, just sobbed. Said, hey, I want to be on the team. What do I have to do? And he said, you missed tryouts. Try next year. And just happened to be that school had a like an activity fair with older kids handing out flyers for various clubs and kind of underappreciated groups and sports, one of which was cross country. And so this really cute girl, she's not going to be listening, but her name was Anna Yates. She was in the hallway and she handed out these flyers and it said, come do cross country. And I just looked at her and I thought, I will do cross country. And then I said, what is cross country? And so I went to practice, and I met my coach, who I still talk to on a regular basis. Her name's Kelly. She's a wonderful person. And in fact, she's probably influenced my life more than anybody, really, outside of my parents, maybe. And I mean, to this day, the thing I'm most passionate about is coaching. And I've been coaching track for over 20 years now. And I turned 42 actually this weekend.
That's awesome, man.
So coaching track, coaching cross country, but that to me was the start. I mean, I couldn't walk for the first 2 weeks of cross country practice and I thought that was how it was for everyone. Rolling out of bed and crawling to the bathroom on your knees because your calves are hurting so bad. But I've had a few lulls in the training, and a couple injuries here and there, but never have I forgotten, kind of what running has given me, and it continues to keep on giving. But that was my start, and I don't see running going anywhere in my life. It's just such a part of who I am and what I do.
It's awesome, man. And I love what you said about coaching. Like, y'all probably know I'm a coach, and it is a far more important part of my life than anything else. It's what I do. So that's awesome, man.
Right. Yeah.
How about you?
It's taken me a few decades to kind of figure this out, but in hindsight, back in when I was 4 years old, I was diagnosed with Legg-Perthes disease. That's essentially where the hip socket starts to deteriorate.
Oh,
and so
okay.
the leg has to kind of be put out at an angle whenever you're on it, to relieve pressure on that hip socket to allow it to not degrade. Now they just throw in a fake hip and you're good to go. But back then they used leg braces, Scottish Rites
Okay.
leg braces. But so there's a bar in between my knees and this, and thought I was only going to have to wear it for a year and a half. And it ended up being, the first 5 years of my memory, from 4 to 9. And when I finally got those leg braces off, and actually walked with my pants swooshing and could actually run. But I'd played soccer, the leg braces, the ball getting kicked between my legs, and played baseball and rode bikes, did everything I could. It was just active. I was just had a normal childhood. But when I got it off in third grade, I don't know what it was, got into trouble a lot. Me and the teacher butted heads. And so when I got in trouble, she'd make me run a lap around the school. And I remember all this because our senior year, she gave us a journal page. She had us write in third grade. And for our senior gift, when we graduated high school, she gave us these journals. And my journal page was, I had drawn a diagram of the school and of the track. And I had circled how many times I had gotten in trouble and had to run around the school. And sometimes when it was really bad, I had to run around the track. And so fast forwarding into high school, having an older brother, we worked together, doing farm work all the time, and we'd fight and argue. And, whenever I got frustrated, when I was about sophomore, junior in high school, I would go out and go run. And so it'd be late at night, old country roads, with the Lost River Range, highlighted by the moon type of runs. And I would just go out and run. And then that was kind of what I kept doing. I played all the different sports in high school, and we had some very successful teams, but I knew it wasn't going to extend beyond high school. And so I just kept running. And then it just was an outlet for me. And I didn't realize it at the time. It was just, I got to run. It was just a natural response. Come to find out it was because of my third grade experience.
Oh man, that's awesome. Well, but for both, I'm a later in life. Like I didn't like running until really recently. So the fact that it started so early for both y'all is really cool. I love that. So for training, if we're looking at some of these races, like the races you put on, much less the ones you do, are not easy. What do y'all do for training? And like, do you train differently kind of depending on your event? Is it kind of just similar, just different amounts of volume? Like what does y'all's training look like?
So training for the Palisades Ultra, or training for like our personal, if we're going to go do our own 100-miler or 50-miler?
Shooting for the latter. Yeah. Like what does your personal training tend to look like? And then as a coach, I'd also like love your perspective as how training might differ between you and like some of the athletes you train.
Jeremy's the expert in this, so I'll let him go.
Oh, great.
Send it.
I know for me, I'm constantly evolving. I'll say that. I'm constantly learning. I listen to a lot of podcasts. The last month I've listened to, quite a few, I can't even list them all here, but just trying to evolve as a coach and as an athlete. I'm kind of reinventing myself constantly. And, probably 5 years ago, I ran my first 100, and that became my only 100 because I got myself hurt, messed up my Achilles a little bit. And I'm only probably, I'd say this year, getting back to it finally. And so I'm trying to do things right. So for me, my training, a lot of zone 2, a lot of just right now, I'm in an aerobic buildup, just trying to slowly build up my ligaments, my tendons. I believe that a lot of people kind of skip that phase. So going slowly and making sure I'm being really honest with my body. I'm a big fan of days off when I need them. This year, or this past winter, or maybe 5 or 6 months, I've really been a lot more consistent in walking as well. That's one thing that people who do don't. That's what I didn't do right the first time around. Is I didn't realize, when as a new ultra runner, how much walking has a bearing on what you. I mean, if you're running a marathon in any decent pace, then you're not walking. You're running through aid stations to grab water and goose. So for me, having to learn that walking was not only important, but it was an important skill to practice was huge. And so now I make sure that maybe on a day off, I'm power hiking 4 to 5 miles. That's what my days off looks like now. And I live on the side of a snowy mountain down in Soda Springs, Idaho. So, I have mountains and trails right there that I can just go out my front door and hit 1,000 foot in 3-4 miles. And it's great. Awesome. But that hiking is huge. But beyond that, I'm also a believer that speed needs to be developed before anything else. And this is something I preach that a lot of people don't, they're almost afraid to touch it. And so when I talk to trail runners that trail run often and want to be faster, that's usually my first thing to talk to them about is, what are you doing for speed? I mean, I do for myself, I do when I'm at that stage in my training, I do critical velocity workouts. I mean, I'm a big believer in tempo running. If nothing else, go out and run 3 to 4 to 5 miles, at a decent clip. So, I mean, if I think of the speed and the efficiency that you get from that, I don't know how technical we really want to get, but I mean, doing variable pace training where some workouts focusing on different paces, and obviously doing long runs. That's one thing I've heard various discussion about. Of like, I just listened to something about Camille Herron. I think she has the longer than 20 miles. 100 record for on a track. I don't remember her time, but she doesn't do long runs. Like twice a month, she does a long run of like 20 miles, and everything else is like 10 to 15 miles a day.
It's more accumulation.
Cumulative volume. And I trained like that, but I think there might be merit in that for me. Who knows?
Yeah, I have I love that we're talking about this, because this is a big thing that I've been thinking about a lot, and I would love your opinion on. So for one thing, Camille also runs 20 miles every day collectively. So we got the cumulative volume effect. So there's definitely something to be said for that. But I will say though, if you have some experience and you're not worried about time on feet at one time, I think this most professional marathoners do a lot of 2-a-days. You look at Kipchoge's schedule, and he does a lot of 2-a-days, just kind of splitting them up into lower volumes. So each effort is a little more performative at each time. But I would say that, and I'd love your opinion, is if you haven't really done an ultra before, I think there might be some value to that super long run. Because when I'm training newer people, they are panicked about the idea that they're going to be out there for 6+ hours. Right. So
less than a professional, that a professional male 50K runner is going to be in the 3-hour range, and a novice is not going to be. And so that's just extra time. And that brings a whole new element to the game of your nutrition and how it's different, and your training and how it's different. Because training for a fast 3 hours is vastly different than training for a slow 8 hours.
Absolutely.
So I would agree with you that time on feet, I think for newer ultra runners, making sure you're hitting those long runs is huge. And then what the elites do is what the elites do. I mean, we, as much as we can train like they do in some ways, you can take the same supplements, you can go get massages. Some people might be lucky enough to take afternoon naps like they do. I would agree that 2-a-days are huge. Yeah. I am a huge advocate of 2-a-days, but how many people with jobs can really focus on 2-a-days? I mean, so I think we're trying to build training into our lives, which is not, it's not something that we can overlook, because your whole life causes stress, and all these stressors happen, and so you need to account for your life. And if you're getting 15-20 miles a day as a recreational runner, that's great. But then your wife leaves you, your dog starts biting you. Your kids don't know who you are. I mean, these are not healthy things. So having a balance for most people is more important. But to the point, I would agree that long runs, probably smart to build those up to a 20-mile-ish level, which, depending on who you are, I think if you're training for an ultra, I think a 2.5, 3 hour long run is not an unreasonable goal to hit a few times before an ultra. But yeah, beyond that, I'm looking into that research now. I mean, maybe there is a law of diminishing returns that, I used to do double workouts training for my 100. I do, 25 on Friday and maybe 30 or 25 on Saturday. That's a big weekend. And maybe it was bad for me. I don't know. But
it's a weird thing, man. Like on the other end, you hear Coop and all of CTS talking about how training camps they're going to do, every one of them is going to do them this year as much as they can because it feels valuable to them. So I just feel like we're seeing a lot of difference between what might be the physiological benefit versus the, psychological benefit to some degree.
Well, and the psychology is not to be overlooked either. I mean, all things considered, that's probably more important in an ultra. Jeff was with me the last 18 miles of my 100-miler, and that was not about physiology. So that was psychology.
To frame that was the Bear 100 from Logan to Bear Lake, and that was the snow. They turned around at Tony's Grove because it had rained all day. And then
snowed.
And then as the sun was setting, it started snowing. And we get up to Tony's Grove, and it's like something you'd see out of a Civil War, winter scene. It was like a death camp. And they turned around and had to go back because there was so much snow they couldn't go up and over. But yeah, it was the mental part of that was intense.
That's a lot, man. I feel like that's most of your job as a pacer is to keep the person focused and not lose their mind.
Yeah, I was very inexperienced. That was my first time pacing. Jeremy had to tell me to shut up at one point. He's like, dude, just shut up. Because he's not in a good place. I picked him up. I'm all ready to go. I'm ready to go bust out 20 miles at a sprint. I'm just so happy. And I just thought, hey, man. And he's like, dude, can you just shut up? It was like the first hour. It's snowing and we're in the mud. And it was funny. But we got some humor, right? We got Tony's Grove. Got warmed up there, switched clothes, and we ran down in that mud, slipping and sliding, and it was a blast.
Giggling.
It just turned around. It was so much fun coming out of there. But going up was the dichotomy of that was just it was addictive. But for me, I found I don't know. I'm not. I've done more of the generic trainings. My first 50K up in Chalice in central Idaho, River of No Return. I trained by the book, the mileage. And the next year I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try out a time on feet training plan. And the next year I didn't worry about mileage. I just time on feet. So I had a lot more fun with that going up into the mountains and I'll be out there for like 4 hours. I only got in 10 miles because it was straight up, but I had a blast.
I like time-based a lot, actually.
I finished within a couple minutes of my previous year's time. So I didn't lose anything by switching over to that, but last year I started adding in some HIIT workouts. I can't find a hill long enough to do them on. And so I, crank a treadmill up to as high as it'll go and then keep that heart rate 3 minutes in zone 4 and then 1 minute in zone 5. And you just alternate as many times as you can. And
that sounds brutal.
I've seen some research coming out this year that talks about intensity versus, distance, that you hit a certain point where diminishing returns and just having a few of those intense tempo runs, or I love the HIIT workout. You should hate it to a certain degree. Then, it's working. So that's kind of my philosophy. Except marriage. Right. I don't have that philosophy there. But good. I mean, you look at this Candace Burt that's approaching 90 days of doing a 50 every single day. And we went from 40 miles a week to 230 or whatever miles a week. And he's adapted. And it's just, I just saw Laz, the race director for Barkley Marathon, creator of the Backyard Ultras. He just announced yesterday that he turned 70 and he wants to do this 3,000 mile traverse of the United States. So he'll head north and hit a point and then go coast to coast. And it'll end up being like 3,000 miles. And he's just, he's like, I keep thinking I'm going to slow down and I don't. And so
Wow.
I don't know. I don't think we've barely scratched what's possible and capable. Especially if we follow like the World Backyard Ultra Championship last October.
Yeah.
And the exponential growth in human potential is just insane.
Yep.
And so we have methods now, but yeah, like Jeremy, it's constantly evolving. And but my biggest and funnest training is just going up in the mountains and playing around and seeing new canyons, new sites, new peaks, and that's the best training ever, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, to that end, like we all know that consistency is what matters most, right? So if you hate your training, you're not going to be consistent. So you got to
stick with it. Yep.
Yeah. You got to at least find the thing you hate the least in every little subset and then enjoy most of it. So you mentioned having an Achilles injury. As someone who is riddled with some like soft tissue stuff, what happened? And then how did you get through that? Like, how have you dealt with injuries in the past, both of you?
So I've not been injury prone. In fact, I didn't have an injury leading up, my adult life. In my adult running, I didn't have any injuries leading up to running the Boston Marathon. And then switching to trail running, it was just a different ball game. My first year doing 50Ks wasn't bad. My next year, I think, was the next year or the year after that where I upped it to like doing 100K and some 50Ks and then my 100 miler. I took the requisite time off after the 100 miler, wasn't injured. I've always been a bigger runner. I ran my 100 miler weighing about 236. So, and I'm 6'2", 6'3". Okay. So I'm not a small guy.
I feel like I'm about 200 at 5'7". So yeah, I'm also like stocky.
Yeah, like thicker. Yeah. So, I after the 100 miler, I actually put on a few more pounds. And then after maybe 2-3 months, I started running again. And I think I jumped into it too quickly because I very soon started having Achilles problems. And I've heard that residual impact from a major stressor like event, like doing 100 and maybe being too big for it or maybe undertrained. I don't know. I think I did fine. But I mean, I had shin splints for the last 50 miles of that 100 miler and then thought I had compartment syndrome after, these huge, like kind of swollen divots in my shins and calves. But I thought I fixed that or let that go down, but I began to have Achilles problem that next summer and just basically struggled for a while. And then it was 2020 before I had they did a 10X procedure on my Achilles. They used to do it for tennis elbow, where they just basically aerate it with some big hollow needles kind of and allow blood flow. They also elongated my calf through what's called a gastrocnemius recession or release. So it made my calf not significantly longer, but significant enough to allow me a little more dorsiflexion in my ankle.
That's cool. And I've heard of that procedure. I've never met anybody who's had it done. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I probably didn't rehab it enough, well enough after. So, I mean, that was, like I said, December of 2020. So for the next year and a half, I mean, it just kind of, and plus my weight. So granted, I mean, a year ago, I weighed 314 pounds and
really?
Now I'm 208. I mean, last year I really hit it hard and actually stopped eating sugar and flour and kind of did intermittent fasting. And so really that helps my running a lot. And I actually hired actually my high school coach's son is a physical therapist and coach. And I hired him for about 6 months and he helped me to do a bunch of, eccentric exercises, and among other things to try to strengthen it. And that plus dropping the weight. I think my philosophy now is to strengthen the Achilles so I get more bang for my buck and to lower the weight. Because I think every running footstep is 9 times your actual body weight. So as a 300-pound person running, you're 2,700 pounds of force on every foot stride. And as a 200-pound person running, you are going to be 1,800 pounds on every foot stride. So if I can increase the strength of my Achilles and calf, like, for example, a single leg squat or something would be a good indicator. If I can increase that strength while decreasing the weight, that's going to make great benefits. In fact, for the last 3 weeks, month in my own training, I have had much less pain and aggravation in my calf or Achilles than I have for years. And that feels really good, and I think bodes well for my future. So that's kind of my Achilles history, I guess.
I feel that. And I can say like I'm have had a, let's call it, complicated relationship with weight, like between my being kind of fat teenager and then underfed and cycles that we don't need to get super into. But like right now I'm like fairly lean, but I anywhere over 185, I definitely have a lot more joint pain. And like everybody's going to have their own like tolerance ratio to that. And I know some people who are perfectly fine, like in that very like Clydesdale running spot, and makes them super happy. Like, I mean, geez, what Nick Bear just ran a sub 3 at just completely jacked in like the low 200 weight range. But like for me, if I'm over 185, my knees and ankles like don't like it. And I think everybody kind of got to feel that space for them.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah. So how about you? Do you end up with any injuries in your running history throughout the mountains?
Yeah. Yep. I've and I don't know if it was from the Legg-Perthes disease formation of my foot, but I have extremely flat feet and some weird stuff with my ankles. Had torn my ACL just after high school, and then had surgery on it. But back then, the way that they reconnected the ACL back in 2000, which obviously was a lot better than 1990. But I was in Memphis at the time and had one of the world's best surgeons do it, but they still kind of did it in an angle, and so it would kind of pull things a little bit differently. So I had, as I got heavily, about the same time as Jeremy, got heavily into running and training. 2017, 2018, started having knee problems that, kind of sidelined me, and was just trying to. We were in the thick of getting the Palisades race going, and all the time and energy and effort and everything went into that, and getting that going. And my body fell apart, but nothing terribly specific. I had my knee scoped and had some cartilage issues, and then it took me a bit to get back into it. And just been did a few races last year, did a 50 miler last year, and really I don't have much on the horizon, but still just that joy of just those adventure runs, and still trying to stay with it and keep that training going.
That's awesome, man. Cool. You had mentioned a little bit about diet. Have either of you found certain like hydration and nutrition strategies that work for you specifically while running? And is it different depending on kind of the distances you're doing? Was hydration and nutrition different when you're running marathons? Like what tends to work for y'all?
I only do gels. No,
all right, Carl Meltzer.
Well, yeah, you finish in an hour, you can do gels. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it works fine for a lot of people, but yeah, no, I do a lot of powdered nutrition personally while running. It's not how I eat in my daily life, but yeah, that's kind of why I ask. Everybody has their stuff that works for them.
Yeah, I don't know. When I first started running, I think the theory of if the furnace is hot enough, it'll burn anything, So it was go do these big, huge, massive long runs, and then go eat Five Guys, what should feed like 3 people, and I would down that out. And then, of course, it didn't work well for my digestive system, but yeah, whole foods. I found that the heavy sugars just don't do well when I'm running, and big fan of bananas. And I've struggled with the different drinks. I've tried a few, haven't found a liquid. I don't know how people do just straight liquid stuff, but I don't know. Still dialing that in. I still, wouldn't be confident going and doing a 100-miler, until I got some more things dialed in on nutrition. But even on the 50-miler, just trying to figure out what's, I only had a couple gels, but every time I did, I was looking for a porta potty within about 20 minutes. And those simple sugars just don't do well for me anyways. and I was going pretty slow. So it wasn't, I should have been able to eat pretty much whatever I wanted because my heart rate was down low enough that I could have eaten fats, sugars, whatever. My body should have been able to handle it.
Yeah. For me in marathoning, definitely a gel guy. I'm actually, one of my goals this year is to qualify for Boston again. So I'm running one more marathon. Maybe it's my last dance. I don't know. With that event distance, I'm on roads, but I'd always been a gel guy and very minimal gels just to try to get through. I wasn't a 4 or 5 hour marathoner. I ran several about 3 hours. And so not a huge need for a ton of carbohydrates in that event. But when I switched to trail running, I jumped in like everyone else, and I'm a voracious eater, obviously. I could eat my way out of anything. And I'd be doing handfuls of M&Ms and, bowls of potatoes and ham with mustard all squeezed in. And I think at one aid station, I ate a whole watermelon in my 100-miler. I think at another aid station, I drank 2 liters of ginger ale. At one point, I don't remember if Jeff was my pacer at this section, when I ate about 50 mini Snickers bars during one section of trail. Yeah. So I was like,
I was coming out of Tony's Grove. We had those coming out of Tony's Grove.
I was like, I need them. Give me more.
That's awesome.
So I just ate how I felt, but I'll be honest, I don't think I recovered well from those races.
Inflammation.
Sure. And like I said, about a year ago, I made a huge shift in my own diet. And so I haven't had a bite of sugar, a bite of flour in a year in my life. So for this last year, and now trying to get back into racing, I've been working on different recipes and trying various things to do on the run. I've figured out what I need for my body. I'll go hiking. I've eaten, I think I was with Jeff last summer. I've eaten ribeye and salad on the top of mountain peaks. And I'll pack it up in a little lunchbox with a cooler, but that's not really an easily, quickly digestible and energy efficient source in a race to eat like a big salad. But the other day I listened to a podcast with, I think they were interviewing Zach Bitter, and he is a low carbohydrate athlete. And so I've been actually for the last 2-3 months knowing that I'm needing to, for my objectives for the year, I'm going to have some long ones. And so I've needed to find like 0 flour, 0 sugars, because when I get to an aid station, I can't eat the quesadilla, so for instance, the other day on my long run, I boiled down 2 sweet potatoes, mashed them up, and put salt and a little nutmeg on them. And I'll tell you, that was way too many sweet potatoes for like a 2-hour run. I ate them during the run. I'm just trying to force myself to eat them. And that's straight carbs. So that maybe is counterproductive, but I kind of still, this was before listening to that podcast with Zach Bitter, but I thought, I need more carbs, just the kind that I need, that I thought that I needed. And that did not do well. I do rice balls. I don't remember who it was. It was Jason Scoop.
Schlarb.
I wasn't Schlarb. But anyway, I found this recipe for rice balls, and I've been doing these on the run for a little while, and I don't mind them at all. Scrambling up some eggs and chopping up some center cut bacon, and mixing some Parmesan cheese and salt and soy sauce in those, and just smashing them into a little baggie. This morning I ordered some like reusable kind of baby pouch things, if you know what I mean, like for like applesauce and stuff. But I'm gonna bring in like, so I'm gonna do my own. I'm gonna fill my own with whatever I can, maybe the rice or maybe some variant of sweet potato, or I do couscous. Jeff mentioned the backyard ultra last fall, where I was literally planning to do a half marathon. Hadn't run over an hour for years. And I ended up going for 13 hours. But when I did that, I had a natural food set up at my own personal aid station there, where every time I came in for those loops, I had an assortment of couscous and sweet potatoes and cheese sticks and avocado and various fruit bowls. I don't think I ate steak, but finding ways to put in the protein. I think nuts. I do nuts, but and I'm definitely open to suggestions. I'm very much, like I said, I'm very much evolving, and the nutrition for me, is something that if I'm going to tackle, objectives where I'm running hard and running fast and long. I mean, it's easy to go fast.
Yeah.
It's easy to go long. Combining the two is something I'd love to figure out. And that's where nutrition becomes tricky, at certain paces. Cause I've proved at the Dizzy Horse that I could digest anything going 12 minutes per mile, but I'd like to be winning trail races someday in the next few years. And if I'm going to do that, I can't be going 12 minutes per mile on flat terrain. So
for sure.
So
nutrition's kind of where I made my bones a lot of the time and a lot of training. You and I should chat so we don't bore everybody, but I'm happy to help you out a little bit with like at least a directive. Cool. That's awesome. And honestly, like what I got from both of you and what I kind of tell everybody is if it works for you, I think that's kind of where we need to go. Because I mean, I can talk physiology all day long, but at the end of the day, if you personally don't digest it well, it's not going to help you. And this is why we see such a range from Mike McKnight over here, who clearly is able to synthesize protein into
I ran 100 miles on water.
Right. And like he's able to like use his own protein as carbohydrates much more efficiently than most people. And then on the other hand, you have Carl Meltzer, who's just pounding gel packs, and like whatever works for you, I think is where we need to be. And if you're willing to experiment, you're more likely to find it.
It's kind of telling that I've seen weight loss programs where they typically, whether someone's doing a keto diet or they're doing just a balanced micro diet, everyone loses the same percentage on either diet.
Oh yeah, man, because they also
the differentiator is muscle mass. So the men lose it faster or more than the women typically, and so those that are retaining muscle or have more muscle mass tend to lose it faster. That was like but it showed me that, these diet fads and stuff, it's all about control and it's about what your body needs and not overindulging. And there's a lot of different ways to get there. It's just what's going to work for you and what you're going to stick to.
Yeah. And that's the big one. And it just also the hyper palatable stuff. And like as someone who has played with all sorts of diets, just like be better at my job. If I eat a whole like 12 to 14 inch pizza and a beer or whatever, that's like 2,500 to 3,000 calories. Whereas like if you have an entire this amount of whole food, it's like 1,200, and it's way easier to eat one of those than the other. So yeah. So if we're looking at your race series, I think the Palisades looks super cool, man. And I would love to know more about that race and like how people sign up, how it got going. It's been running for a little while now, and everybody, at least out here, knows about it. I'd love to hear more about that race and how it got going.
Oh, well, when I started trail running, like I said, I kind of jumped in head over heels and started directing some fun free events. And then thought this is going to be something that I want to continue and pursue and offer to more people and share the things that have brought me a lot of joy. And so started investigating areas to do a bigger race. Jeff came on board in the process pretty quickly. And, being the tech genius that he is with mapping and a great photographer and knowing the software, the ins and outs of all that stuff was really helpful. But after a couple of years of scouting, we pulled the trigger and had this race and got approval from Forest Service and did all the things we needed to do. And that first year was a little scary. We didn't know if we were going to come back the next year. It's a backcountry race. And I just sat down with some of the Idaho Trail. Idaho has a trail series called the Idaho Trail and Ultra Series. And there's probably 13 races in it. And 12. Yeah. So we all got together and had a meeting a couple of weeks ago. And everyone a couple of people were complaining about, having to, bring some supplies in like a mile up the road from the car or whatever. And our aid stations, we've got 1, 2, 3. Is it just 3, 4, 3? Three now, 3 wilderness aid stations where you're packing in stuff 3 to 7 miles over very difficult terrain. We have llama teams that pack in things and horse teams. We've used motorcycles. We even we even rented a ridiculous one-wheel bike thing that
We
did
don't
not
need to talk about that.
too soon to talk about that.
So on flat terrain, it would have been great.
Yeah.
On our terrain, not great. It was,
But
we had some people mad at us for making them use those.
yeah,
I'm
but
trying
the
to
first
imagine
year,
a one wheel over a rocky terrain. I feel like that would be, yeah.
it
was motorized.
Yeah, it was mechanized. Yeah, it
Yeah.
pulled you, but it was
It's a nightmare.
yeah.
Yeah,
Anyways,
but-
we don't need to talk about
But
that.
back to the first year, you know, it was, you know, a lot of it was just trail that, you know, we had explored for the most part, but there was some of it, a few sections that hadn't been connected without snow on it. And ultimately we made last minute changes, and, you know, no one died that year, you know, and no one has died any year of the Palisades Ultra, to be clear. But so we counted that as our success, but that's a pretty low bar. And we had to dig deep and think about, are we going to come back and do this the next year? And we made some changes to the race. And, you know, I think having a race board that we do have, and we have several people that, you know, that come and support and just feedback with their ideas and help carrying the load of, you know, responsibility. Because for any undertaking, any trail race, it's tough. And what I think of our races, you know, having a 13-mile race and a 100-mile race and everything in between on the same, you know, 36-hour period is, it's a lot. And what half marathoners want and what 50K runners want and need is not the same as a 100-miler, you know? So trying to cater to everyone is a fun challenge, but it is a challenge. And so, I mean, that's really how we got started.
Well,
with the race, I think.
In picking that location, it was some of these trails completely overgrown. Nobody was using them. They're like, yeah, there's a trail here. It says so on the map. And so we invested heavily in some, you know, we bought like a $1,200 brush cutter that's like a massive double-handled 10-inch saw blade on it,
Nice.
weed whack, essentially.
We've been through 30 of those blades in the last 3 years,
Yeah.
probably.
So much brush cutting.
But to clear these trails that aren't getting used, but now we've got people out there training on them and using them. And but the whole focus, we wanted to do something different than a show up in a parking lot, which I love. I mean, I love the old school, like Jim Skaggs hits it right on the head, just that old school vibe. You just show up and run. But we wanted to create something that people would want to travel all over the world to attend, and not just show up into a parking lot and jump out of their car and go run. And so we've partnered up with the Big Elk YMCA. So the YMCA, they have a camp, Big Elk YMCA camp, and this big facility with a lodge and with outbuildings and with, you know, this place where they hold camps, you know, for kids to come and stay during the summer and do these youth camps. And so that was what we wanted this to be, this vacation destination. You're an hour from Jackson Hole. You're, you know, an hour and a half from West Yellowstone, and Yellowstone and Island Park. And so to be able to come and see the world famous stuff, but then to get on trails where as a 100-miler, you might not see anybody for a couple hours when you're out on those trails.
And it's hard to find a more beautiful section of trail. And that's as difficult as our race is. And we could get into why it's difficult, but it's not your normal, it's not a logging road. I mean, we have, I think 95% of it is single track and rutted single track with rocks and roots. And sometimes you can barely see the trail because of, even as much as we brush cut, you know, you've got weeds and stinging nettle like encroaching on you. And there's certain sections we don't recommend you run in shorts because of, you know, how quickly these weeds just overtake it. But no one has ever said this is not one of the most beautiful places they've ever been to. I mean, they've said other things like that was way tougher than I thought, and move the rocks, please. And I now know that I hate stinging nettle, but they've all been, wow, you undersold the beauty. And we try to not do that, but it's hard to explain how gorgeous it is in July.
Well, and it was one of those, when we started exploring it, I'd been playing in that, you know, for several years before the race series. And so I was familiar with the major areas, but we started trying to connect everything. And, you know, there was one section, the very start of the 50K and 50-miler. and the start of the halfway point for the 100-miler that we've now dubbed the Bruno Trail because nobody talks about it. Nobody wants to talk about Bruno.
We don't talk about Bruno, Jeff.
You know, this couple 1,000-foot climb in the first couple miles. And it's
from
just
the
straight
start
up.
line.
And
The start line.
And it's straight up.
Oh, man.
So the 100-milers at mile 50 have to come down this thing.
And then turn around.
And they're sitting there like, and you can see the trees on the ridge line up above you as they're sitting there at the aid station. And their cutoff is 2 a.m. So that some of them are sitting there in the middle of the night, like, but anyways, just the struggle on that. We've had people comment, and we this is just the trails we run. So there's been a lot of things that we've learned over the years of the difficulty and nature of it, which this is probably only not even half as difficult as the original vision. The original vision and the original map I had was unbelievably insane, and someone would have died on it. But and so it's funny because it's all relative, because people are talking about how hard this is. You're like, oh, you have no idea what we could have done. And we attempted to do. And, you know, it was nuts trying to pull off what we did pull off. But with this, you know, we've had people comment. They're like, you know, I looked at the map and I looked at the terrain profile, and I see this 4-mile section, you know, that after running for like, we have 1 mile of like road, you know, to connect trailheads essentially. And they're like, after that, I saw this 4-mile section and it's flat to the next aid station. I thought I could just fly. They're like, even the flat stuff is challenging. I couldn't open up throttle. You know, there's maybe 2 miles of road for the 100-milers, well, and 50-milers. And those sections you can open up full throttle, but that's it. You know, the rest of it is you look up and you're astounded by what you're seeing, and then you're
tripping and
trip
falling.
on your face.
We have to look at the ground. Yeah.
And we put in, we submit to the Forest Service. It helps them. We have a great relationship with Caribou Targhee National Forest. Phenomenal. They essentially, whatever we've asked for, they've provided. They clear the major logs, and we take care of all the brush that we can and all the stinging nettle. But we put in about 300 hours with our local Idaho Falls Trail Runners and us on these trails, trying to clear them. And, you know, we haven't had any major like trail construction projects, but it's all just maintaining what's there.
I mean, 30 to 40 blowdowns every winter, not uncommon on those trails. And there's been times I've backpacked in with my chainsaw. I think one year the Forest Service funding was down, and so we hiked in with my chainsaw and took a lot down. But yeah, the Forest Service, they're pretty full force now, and they go out on horses. And last year when we were marking trails, there was still several. So days before the race, there were still a few big blowdowns way back.
And we let them know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And the Forest Service came out and they met us when we were marking the trail, and they zipped, you know, with their big old Forest Service chainsaws and horses. They you know, got these trees all taken down for us, and very, very helpful. But yeah, it's a lot of work to get out there, and it's not easy country, no question.
It's awesome. I mean, yeah, the photos on the site look stunning, and coming from a place where the photos don't do it justice, I can only imagine what it might actually look like. Yeah.
Well, in the time of year, it depends. The first year was last weekend of July. And so one of our most iconic shots is back in what we call Paradise Loop. And it's literally, you're back in there like, man, this is just paradise.
Flowers as high as your chest.
And so
I mean, just crazy.
But lupine meadows everywhere. And then we've had years where the snow melt is late. And so we get a lot of great flowers down low, but not up top. And so it's a really diverse based on the elevation. And you're going to get flowers at some point.
Yeah.
It just depends on how deep in you go and what race you're doing. But lots of water crossings. It's great if you've got a little filter with you, a catadine, you can just scoop and go. But if you're a 100-miler, your feet are going to be dry for the first, 7.5 miles, and then they're going to be wet the rest of the time. So we've seen some gnarly feet pictures. So, then you throw in the rocks, you throw in the brush, you throw it, so it's technical. There's just not a lot of room to breathe, and you've got to be on your game. We had a 55% DNF rate last year for a 100-miler. We did not have a single female finisher. We had one finish, but she was an hour over time, so I need to correct that. But she came in looking like her hip socket was gone, and she was hot. Like it was bad. But
Yeah.
people underestimate it tremendously, especially from the Midwest. We've had people from the flatland come in, and it got hot this last year. We were up there at elevation. You're in the low 80s to mid 80s, so it was 90 degrees in the valley, down low. But we've had Sylvia Greer. She came and ran and completed it the first year in our insane year, and then she's come back and completed it again. And then we've had Pam Reed came and joined us for our first year as well, and she did finish. But we've only had 2 other females that have finished the race, so that kind of gives you an idea of the
just as brutal.
Yeah, and we don't. It's not like we have 100 milers running either. I mean, we're 20 to 30.
20, yeah.
We're this last year we were a little light on numbers, but we had an incredible field. Everybody finished the first 50 miles. We've never had. It's such an awesome group, and we have several of them coming back. A lot of them wanting a redemption. We only had 5 finish out of like 20 that started, and so we've got a lot coming back for redemption, and we're stoked about that. So we took 2021 with the unknowns. Our COVID numbers were at the highest they'd ever been in Idaho. We had to make a decision in December, and we decided to hold off in 2021. We pushed through in 2020, and it wasn't fair to people. I mean, we've had people sign up from Canada, from France, and so they're trying to make all these arrangements, and they're trying to get in. The best pricing ends in January, and so they're trying to make a decision 6-7 months ahead. And if we end up having to cancel it, and so it was in doubt 6 months in advance. So we Siri's talking to Jeremy there. So so we ended up canceling it. So we kind of last year, we it was one step backwards, but already this year our 50K, we're just about maxed out. Our half marathon is getting pretty close. I think there's only about 9 or 10 spots left in each of those.
Cool.
We've got way more 50 milers. We've already got 10 more 50 milers signed up this year than we did have show up to the starting line last year. And the 50 miler is very unique. It's not a very popular event because we have a 2 a.m. start time. And this was Jeremy's idea. Well, the idea was all of the races, except for the half marathon, all of them finished the last 10 miles on the same track. So the half marathoners do this turnaround, and that's where the 100 milers and 50Kers and 50 milers come down. And so the last 10 miles, everybody's finishing that last 10 miles together. And so to do that, we needed to figure out a time when 50 milers could start with the 100 milers when the 100 milers have their cutoff, which is 2 a.m. But the beauty of it is how many people have an opportunity to basically stay up all night, run through most of the night in preparation for a 100 miler. Most races don't allow you to do that. You essentially have to figure it out on 100 miler. So this 50 miler gives you an opportunity to do sleep deprivation. It's actually easier than our 50K in elevation gain per mile. But also the fact that you've got 4 hours before the sun comes up. And so you're middle of summer and you're avoiding all that heat. And in a lot of ways, it's easier. But we have had people in the 50K that they tend to get hit the hardest. They start at 6 a.m. and they underestimate it. They go out hard and they blow up. Those are their runners that tend to need the most medical attention are the 50Kers because they underestimate things. But
I can see that. Like for your race, if anybody is thinking about doing it, because I will say definitely sold it well. Any advice to people thinking about coming and doing it?
So I try to reply. I do reply to every email that we get, asking questions about the race. And we have a requirement for the 100 miler that you have to have completed a 50 miler, which honestly is with our finish rate, which is less than 50% easily, right?
Well, this last year, it's typically 40 to 45% DNF rate.
So when you think of such a high DNF rate in a race, maybe we should have a more stringent, metric to allow people to even sign up for the 100. But anyone that asks from any race distance, I just tell them, this is not, number one, it's not a road race. Number two, it's not a trail race like you might think. This isn't the Bonneville Shoreline Trail in Utah Valley. I mean, that's a beautiful trail. I spent many miles on it, but if a biker can be on it, you're probably not comparable to the Palisades Ultra.
I like that. Okay.
Because it's
people try to take bikes on. There is one section. We've got about 15 miles that you could bike. I wouldn't. It's scary to me on a bike. I wouldn't bike that. I mean, but there's other sections you just don't see mountain bikers out there.
Yeah.
It's just too rough. You see horses, and that's about it. Horses and hikers.
Yeah, if a mountain goat can go there, that's where we're going to put our trails. So, but no, that's what I tell people. I mean, in all honesty, I don't want anyone to have expectations of having a personal record course or or I don't know. I think it could be a great first time ultra for certain distances, but you have to know what you're getting into. And we're not at a high elevation. I think our average elevation is maybe 7,000 feet, 6,500 feet.
Yeah, we top out at like 9,500. We're shy of 10,000 at the high point. And there's you don't climb up to a peak at any point. We do have our Bruno Trail that takes you up to Quaker Flat.
But that's from the lowest point of the race.
Yeah. So yeah, it's elevation, but obviously you're coming from sea level. You're coming from, we just had a guy sign up from New York yesterday, and I'm just thinking, man, this is complete opposite of what you're going to experience. But heat training can get you about half of the way there. If people can compensate with heat training,
for sure,
and some supplement, there's some different irons and different stuff you can take that you can kind of supplement about 40 to 50% of the altitude. But even though we're not hitting 14,000 feet or even over 10,000, there is going to be a little bit of heat. So one of the canyons, Dry Canyon, gets humid in the afternoon. It's got underground springs. You don't see them, but it's long, exposed. It's downhill, but it's brutal. And so yeah, very challenging. We had Mark Hammond came and did our 50K in 2000, or was that 2019?
One of those years.
But it was the summer he was going to go do the Wonderland Trail and try to break the FKT. And he was using a race as a training, his final long run. And I almost get offended when people do that. And it's Mark Hammond. He can do, if he wants to do that, great. Like he's one of the exceptions. But he ran it in some hokas, some street hokas. It blew me away. Like, I don't know how he did that, but he came in, set a new course record, and then he didn't make the FKT. I don't know how many weeks later it was. And he said, yeah, my legs weren't quite recovered from my previous run. He didn't say what it was. He didn't throw the phone there. He didn't give us the credit. But I felt a little sense of pride of don't underestimate us. But surprisingly enough, we had a guy come out and beat his record by like a minute. One of the coolest parts of our race that we get so many compliments. We have a professional announcer whose wife is like qualified for the Olympic trials, and she runs the half marathon. Good luck beating her, folks. But she'll do our half marathon. He's the announcer, and we got this big blaring stereo system, and you can hear it up the canyon. And so when you're like a mile up the canyon, you can hear stuff coming. And we have this parking lot. You loop around and you finish coming up these old stairs, railroad ties, in the grass, and you have to come up this hill.
So yeah, your last 18 steps are up steps.
It's very brutal. But he yells into this PA system. We knew the guy had to be close, and we're like, we got so-and-so coming in. We don't know. He's got 2 minutes to beat Mark Hammond's record. And he came in with like 30 seconds to spare, beat his record. The guy's not a professional or anything. And it was one of the funnest experiences to see that. But yeah, don't overestimate it or underestimate it. Do overestimate it. It's getting out now more, but the first couple of years, man, people, and the trails were a lot rougher then. We've done a lot of clearing and beating back of brush and making it much easier. The half marathon times especially are getting faster, but people still, they just come in thinking, oh, how hard can it be? So
yeah, I hear that. Well, awesome, man. It sounds like a really great race. Honestly, it's made my list of things I'd like to do someday. Not this year, but someday. If somebody, because this is going to be a shorter, speedier for me. If we're looking at like anybody who wants to sign up, I guess like where would they do that? When do they need to do that by? How do they find y'all?
So PalisadesUltra.com is going to be the easiest, or you can do a search on Ultra Sign Up. We're still old school that way. We haven't jumped ship like a lot of other people are doing, but it's old school, but it works. I like it. We still have kind of have 3 tiers on pricing. So we just barely missed the best pricing, but we still have some early bird pricing going on right now. But I imagine within the week, by the end of next week, the 50K will be sold out and we'll have a wait list. And then registration, we were closing that June 30th. And so we have a couple weeks that, we can get those final orders put in for everything.
But looking at our numbers, I would not wait. I know for me, I always look at my race entry numbers when I'm thinking of signing up and I'm not sure. We are, 200% above any other year in terms of volume of racers.
Yeah, and some of the distances.
We're going to have a wait list for everything, I believe, this year. So
that's awesome. Congrats, guys. That's big. It sounds like you've really built a thing up there. That's really cool.
Yeah.
We built the thing. It is that.
Yeah. Good thing. Sounds like a good thing. Yeah. I'm sure somebody might not agree with you after 98 miles, but
no, after this last year, every aid station captain and every person we had at aid stations was a member of our Idaho Falls Trail Runners.
Cool.
So everybody at every aid station had ran a trail race, had loves the mountains, understands when those runners come in what they're dealing with. They're hearing about, oh, there's this runner, he's on the side of the trail a mile up the road or up the trail, and having some of our aid station workers run up and grab them and help them to the aid station, and understanding what that's like. And so it complements this last year, because we haven't always had trail runners as aid station captains or as volunteers. And this last year really hit it out of the park. And that was, it's the volunteers that make it. So.
Yeah, they're so important. I just know this sport would never happen without people working aid stations.
Well, it would be self-supported. It would suck.
Yeah, it's a very strange thing. So yeah, I feel you. Thank you, guys. Anything else you want to share or get out there before we close this out?
No, I just like here. I first learned about trail running, and I asked one of our local running shops, why don't you guys start a Facebook page? I didn't know about trail running. And they're like, well, why don't you start it? I'm like, well, the trail running in Idaho Falls, like who's going to do that? But whatever you have, even if it's not trail running, if it's road running or treadmill running or Zumba, whatever it is, start a group, and get those like-minded weirdos to join you and get out there and enjoy it and build that community, because you'll never know where it'll lead, but it'll lead you to better places than where you're at now. I can tell you that.
So. I would definitely echo that and say that, I started the race with Jeff when I lived in Idaho Falls, and I've been gone for 4 years, moved about an hour and a half away, and I live in a small community. And I've, tried to recently to start up new groups to, kind of replace the one that I lost. And I'll still travel and come up here for certain events just because of such a great community it is. Next week I'm traveling to Vegas for a few days just for vacation. And I've been looking into trail running groups there, and I can't really find anything to the extent that Idaho Falls has. And there's good trails there, but I think I would just echo that sentiment that when you're with a group of people that are like-minded and you can just get a little silly as an adult. We live in a very a society that's very disconnected physically, even though online we're more connected for good or for bad than others. It's we need physical connection and we need the outdoors. And I think trail running provides so much of that, that whether you're winning races or whether you're just participating and want to make a fun memory with your kid or your best friend or your cousin or your neighbor, then trail running can offer that. So I would say it's a very key part of our society. It's going to keep us connected.
Well, and the diversity in doing so that I found after the first year or two, I started looking around. I'm like, I never would have associated with these people, complete opposite side of the aisle as me, completely different backgrounds, all these different things. And so the diversity that's out there has been one of the biggest joys. And we get out on the trails, and even on our Facebook, I don't have to moderate anything. We don't have these political arguments, or we don't have, all the current affairs going on. Like we talk about what we love because we're doing what we're passionate about, and all that negativity just kind of in this world of contention and argument and who's right and who's wrong, like all that just is peeled away, and we just enjoy the outdoors together. It's pretty fascinating. I wouldn't say experiment, but pretty fascinating to see what's come of it as a result of that. So,
yeah, couldn't agree more. I've had the exact same experience. Like in this, I think the outdoors and just getting out there kind of bonds us. Whatever might be going on in your day to day, it matters.
Yeah, for sure. Agreed.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to hang up for 1 sec. Anybody who listens to this, thank you. And we'll be back soon with another one.
Thank you for listening to the show. To be clear, I'm not a doctor nor a registered dietitian, and nothing you heard was medical advice. You should always speak with a qualified medical professional before making any changes to your training regimen. If you enjoy the podcast or found it useful, please take a couple seconds to give it a rating or share it with a friend. Every little bit helps. And if you want more of this information, please head to the Trail and Ultra Running Nutrition group on Facebook. You'll be in good company with other like-minded people who like to do hard stuff outside.